Welcome to the Lights On podcast, featuring stories behind building and running successful hotel businesses. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Lights On podcast. I'm Kin Siu, CEO of Lights On, and we have Carrie Brown, VP of Commercial Strategy at Lights On. Both of us are going to be the hosts today. On this podcast, we share stories across hospitality about building and growing hotel businesses. This episode is sponsored by Lights On. Lights On helps hotels grow revenue more consistently by managing pricing, distribution, and digital marketing together. We help hotels identify new revenue opportunities so they don't leave money on the table. We also run the full revenue and marketing operation so the team on the ground can stay focused on the best guest experience. If your hotel needs more revenue growth, visit lightson.co to learn more. Before introducing today's guests, I want to give a big thank you to Brent Shiratori, who connected us to our guest today, which our guest, Kiana Beimes, General Manager of the OUTRIGGER Waikiki Paradise Hotel and the 2026 Hawaiʻi Women in Lodging and Tourism Women of the Year. Kiana started as an intern at the famous OUTRIGGER's the OUTRIGGER Reef Resort and worked her way through front desk, guest services, and hotel manager roles. But what sets her apart is how she operates. She's the kind of the operations leader who gets everyone in a canoe heading in the same direction across operations, revenue, marketing, all of it. She led the 10-month renovation that turned the Ohana Waikiki East into one of the Waikiki's top-ranked properties, the Paradise Hotel today. And she did it without losing the team or the guest experience along the way. Super excited to hear the whole story. Kiana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that introduction, Ken. I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Yeah, super excited to, before we get into the nitty-gritty part of things, we always like to start with how everyone got into hospitality in the first place. So, Kiana, what was that like? Because you literally grew up in Waikiki, surrounded by hotels, right? So,
Wow.
when did you realize that hospitality was going to be your career?
I didn't realize it was going to be my career, but I knew it was going to be part of my life since I was very young. Since, as you mentioned, I grew up in and around Waikiki my entire life. And so I was just always near the hotels. My mom worked in concessions in hotels. My grandmother worked at one of the millions of ABC stores in Waikiki. And so because they worked there and I lived in Waikiki and I went to school in Waikiki, I knew friends and friends' parents and friends' aunties and uncles and grandparents, and those became Hanai aunties and uncles of mine. I would naturally somehow just end up in the swimming pools of these hotels, just hanging out with, different people that I knew that worked there. Back in those days, it was much more of a safe environment and I think much more casual. So, disclaimer there, but I would hang out at the Hyatt Regency swimming pool and I would actually play shoot pool at the game room at the Outrigger Reef when I was a young child. So I was always around it and I loved the feeling that it gave me. But it wasn't actually until I went to KCC, Kapiolani Community College, that I then realized, wow, I can actually make it a career. And so once I learned that, then I just ran with it pretty much. And I ran straight to Outrigger.
Wow. So, well, before you started your career at Outrigger, right? So you actually received a scholarship named after the Outrigger's co-founder,
Yeah.
was there a connection that got you eventually to Outrigger?
Actually, no, but I feel like it was a sign. I applied for the Estelle Kelly scholarship while I was at KCC. And, when I received it, it was presented to me by Dr. Chuck Kelly, who is the grandson of the founder. And so I have pictures of myself with him at the banquet, receiving my scholarship officially from him. And this was before I was even searching for the internship. I was only, I think a year before graduating. So I wasn't exactly looking for that part yet. But looking back, I can't help but see that it was all just, in the stars for me to be here. And
Hmm.
then, yeah, the following year is when I started scouting for internships.
That's how you landed at Outrigger and
Yeah.
staying there for the whole time through the transition. And for the listeners who don't know, so Outrigger was a locally founded, one of the biggest locally owned hospitality group that was later on acquired by KSL, a
Yeah.
private equity firm. So you kind of lived through that through transition in Korea. So you definitely like seen
Yeah.
everything of
Both
it.
sides. Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so you started there as an intern, right? Are there anything kind of thinking back those times, anything that you learned back in those early years that you're still using those kind of learnings as a GM today?
Oh, definitely. I think that it opened my eyes to the nonstop operating hours of a hotel and that, there is no closing time and it's open every day, every year because we have guests to take care of. So I think that it was something that everybody knows, but until you're really thrown into the mix of the actual operation itself, you don't realize the amount of work that goes into the off hours, the overnight hours, And so when I was an intern, I really enjoyed it because I just acted the part. I felt like I was wearing a uniform, so I already felt like I was part of the company, and I was able to greet the guests and take the bags and help them to the room. And I rotated all around that hotel. So when I went to housekeeping, I was making the rooms, making the beds, cleaning the bathrooms, doing all the trash, making sure that it was just perfect to turn over. And even that experience was very eye-opening because I did not realize just how intense, I mean, you clean your house, you clean your room, but cleaning a hotel room is like no other, especially when it's a sports group and with a bunch of teenage boys and you see all kinds of things in there. And so I immediately had a great sense of respect for the housekeeping department just because of all of the physical labor that they have to put into that room times, 15 rooms. And but I learned from them just to really be consistent and that you always want to make sure that you're working smart and smarter than harder. So for example, when you're cleaning the bathroom, you're wiping from top to the bottom instead of, going up and down and making sure you use your legs wisely and, making sure that you set your body up for success for long term and not just overworking it. To Carrie's point when she gave me advice, learning when to rest, making sure you take care of yourself and hydrate because those hours, even though it's an 8-hour shift, it's a lot to do for that time for the housekeeping department. And then for the front desk, that was very eye-opening too because from someone's perspective who doesn't know what goes on at the front desk, a lot of folks think, oh, it's just checking in and checking out and saying aloha, but there's so much that goes into it. And that was the position that I actually landed mid internship. And so I learned there's so much that goes on there, and you're constantly making executive decisions. You're trying to problem solve. There's all kinds of issues that the guests are experiencing. And so when I started there, I was a night auditor. And
Mm.
so you work overnight. I learned about the wonders of working overnight and all the characters that come out and how much work really goes into it. So back in my day, when we were doing the night audit, it was not as, simple as it is these days. These days, it's very automated, but back then I was really, processing the ledgers and making sure that we were balanced. And for every discrepancy, we had to go and find out where it was before we could turn the day over. And manually running all of the military reports and making sure that that ledger was reported to our military segment. And but it was great because I I always had an issue that night, every single night. So there was always a discrepancy to solve. There was always a guest um, that was needing extra support or assistance, or maybe, their funds weren't going through. So there was always something to learn. And I feel like since we didn't have a manager that worked overnight, it caused me to learn faster. And so I really attribute a lot of my success from those early years of being working on my own and having no one else to ask for help. So just figuring it out as I went. And then when I would see the manager later in the morning, I would say, okay, I have these issues that happened and only this many are left over. So could you help me figure out how would you solve this? Because I don't know how to solve these three problems. But these 10 that I did are finished. So I'd ask them to kind of walk me through what they would do so that I would learn so that the next time I would work, when it would come to me, then I would figure it out.
Kiana,
Yeah.
did you have any mentors back then that you still kind of talk to now?
And mentors back then when I was an intern,
Yeah.
that's a great question. I mean, not in the way that I had when I was, actually going through management, but I
Yeah.
had a lot of supporters. So, I mean, I learned to just really foster relationships with a lot of the leaders. And
Mhm.
actually, one person that I really grew close to was Myra Kuboyama, who she's since retired,
I
but
know.
yeah, what a legend. She is the former director and area director of housekeeping for the Outrigger Reef Waikiki Beach Resort. And when I was interning for her, she really took me under her wing and she talks to you like you're her daughter,
Mhm.
even if she just met you, and she will kind of tell you, so what do you want to do? So why are you here? Why are you here to learn? Because she really wants you to think for yourself. And so she really taught me to be present and whatever I was doing to give it 100% because she is such a um not a perfectionist, but she really is all about giving quality work. She doesn't believe in, cutting corners and that's why she's such a great director of housekeeping while she was because she was so consistent and she did things the right way and she worked smart and she made sure that everything was accounted for. Her all of her P&Ls were just clean and everything made sense and it all had a story. And so she actually recruited me when I was hired as a night auditor. She wanted me to be the supervisor for housekeeping. And I felt a strong pull to the front desk because I just started and I said, they just gave me a shot. I feel like I can't just leave them like 2 weeks in. I just didn't really want to do that. I thought that maybe that would be, kind of a slap in the face to the front office department. So I was really invested in the people that gave me opportunities. But, I don't mean to be ungrateful in any way, but I actually didn't really have a mentor. I learned a lot from the experiences that I went through and I took note of everything I could. And every time I failed, then it was a really great way to just not do that in the next time that it happened.
And I
But
find I think that that trait of yours has really found its way into your leadership style because I mean, having worked with you for such a long period of time, it it's such a wonderful, beautiful thing to be able to talk to somebody and not have to really go not have to go 10 rounds with different people. It's just so hey, Kiana, I need this, and you figured it out. And it
yeah.
was really just so beneficial for us as a team. And so for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And I'm grateful that you stuck to the front desk because
It's funny. I'm remembering. Thank you, sister, for saying that. But now that you're saying that, I'm almost thinking like I would have benefited from having more people to ask questions to. Do you remember the time we had to make a dive-in movie flyer?
Okay, sounds
And
like that's a
Edwin,
story
oh
worth
my
digging
God.
into.
Oh my gosh, we were doing dive-in movies at the beachcomber. And so basically what it was, we showed movies at the pool deck, and our general manager asked me to make a flyer for the dive-in movies for the guests. I know it's ridiculous. And I went on Word and I made something and I printed it and I gave it to him. It was terrible. Like it looked like something you make in first grade. He took it and showed it to Carrie. And Carrie said, "What the hell is that?" And you know what I should have done is I should have reached out to Brent Shiratori and I should have asked him to help me. But at that time, I was just such a figure it out. You just don't know. I just didn't know that I had so many people to help me because I think my entire journey, I was just very self-sufficient and I just figured it out. But it was funny because Edwin and Carrie both looked at me like, "What is this?" And now I look back, I'm like, I have no idea. I can't believe I made that. And now there's things called Canva and all these awesome devices that you can make these pretty flyers. But um, sorry, you just made me think about how I didn't ask for help, and sometimes I probably should have.
Well, I think that actually two principles from the experience to call out. One is like kind of being willing to be imperfect, but like biased for action, right? Versus I think lots of challenges that we all have is like, you know, all want to be the professionals and trying to like get something so perfect, but you know that hinders progress, right? So I think kind of
Right.
to Carrie's point, this is one of your leadership style to just push for it, and it's okay just to like fall flat on the face as long as like you don't do the same thing next time. I
Right.
think honestly, this is like the fastest way to make progress.
Yeah.
And generally just your experience, you know, touching on all aspects of operations, right? You know, something that Carrie always talk about is, you know, things happens in hospitality beyond a spreadsheet, right? And you know, especially you know, us more on the revenue and the commercial side, the marketing side of things, you know, we look at you know, returns and things like that, all data analytics and all that. But, you know, if, you know, people don't understand, there are always consequences that happen beyond the spreadsheet or kind of that change of a number, right?
Hmm.
This is kind of when everything could break when running in a hotel. So kind of, you know, knowing that, you know, whether somebody is a GM or just on the, you know, the corporate side, the revenue, the marketing side, I think just having that experience it's gonna really help like truly understand what's going on in
Yeah,
hospitality.
definitely. Because also too, there's like, analysis paralysis. So it's like if you're looking at it too closely for too long and you don't actually act on it, you really won't know if it's working or not. And it'll just stay on the spreadsheet, like you
Yeah.
said. So I've always been a fan of trial and error and, adjusting as I need. So it's been good for me, but looking back, I just feel like I could benefit from maybe giving another look or another round or consultation from someone else. But that's just kind of how I've always been. I just go and we just figure that out as we go.
Yeah. So back then going through from, you know, starting from the bottom at the entry level, right? Did you ever dreamed about being a GM? Is it kind of like your ambition or it's just like everything just kind of fall on, you know, naturally to getting to where you are right now?
The latter. So I never considered ever becoming a general manager, and not for any particular reason. It was just because I knew what I wanted to feel in my life, and I wanted to feel proud, and I wanted to feel that I could help people, and I wanted to know that I could make an impact. And, I knew that I wanted to be in this career industry. So I wanted to just make people smile. I wanted them to feel happy, and I wanted to build relationships with them so that when they would come back, I'd have these friends in faraway places. And so that was something I always was very proud of, was my ability to connect with the guests. And that was actually from when I was a really small child. Um, like there's times when I would go after school to ABC store, and in one instance, I was visiting my grandmother at ABC store, and this group of tourists, they actually came up to me, and I was only 7 years old, and they asked me, "How do you get to?" Well, they were showing me this like map, and they asked me how to get to Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center, but they didn't speak English. And I said, "Oh, it was my first time ever getting presented with that." And I just said, "You want me to take you?" And I said, "Come with me. I'll show you." And I walked them from ABC store that was closer to High's Steakhouse. And I led them all the way to the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center. And it's funny because I don't think I ever saw them again, but just knowing that I helped them get to where they wanted to go, and they couldn't speak to me, but we were just, it was so rewarding, and I felt so good about that. And that is what really fills my cup. So when it came to my long-term career trajectory, I just knew how I wanted to be involved, which was to be with the people. And how that looked, I really had never thought of before. I just genuinely enjoyed the front desk because it was a lot of guest facing opportunity. Not so much during the overnight. That was one thing that surprised me when they told me, "Oh, well, we have a position for you." Great. It's going to be graveyard. And I'm like, "Oh, I guess they're all sleeping." So it was a little bit less, but I knew I wanted to work in the daytime, and I knew I wanted to talk to the guests more, and I wanted to have more FaceTime with them. And it was such a great experience. So I don't regret any of that leading up to where I've gone. But, my first mentor I ever had truly was Cece Hamao. And she's the general manager at the Outrigger Waikiki Beachcomber Hotel. And she and I have truly grown up together in this company, actually. So when I was working at Outrigger Reef, she joined the company as our front office manager. So she was leading that department, and she recruited me as an agent to apply for a management position, a guest services management position. And it never even occurred to me to even think that I could do it. And
Mm,
so she came to me and she said, I want you to consider applying. And I told her, well, I'm not so sure about that, but I'll think about it. And, she said, okay, I'll give you a week. And then right when that week was up, she came to me again. She said, have you thought about it? And I said, yes, I have. And I don't think I can do it. And she said, why? And I said, well, I just don't think I can because I've never done that before. And she's like, well, you have to try. You just have to give it a shot. And if you don't like it, then you can make a change. And I did. And to my surprise, I loved it even more than being
mm,
an agent for the past 4 years because my impact to the guests was even greater. And I was able to help more people on a bigger scale. And not just the guests, but I was able to help the staff, which was even more of a prouder moment because watching them learn how to navigate through the challenges and even the financial aspect of being able to balance or how do I take care of this guest because we're applying a credit on behalf of the hotel and they wouldn't understand how to do certain things. So coaching them and seeing them realize that they were making progress was always a great feeling. And then eventually those steps led me to other leadership positions in the front desk, and that led me to where I'm at today.
mm. So let's talk about that. So fast forward to you now became the GM, right? When you were handed the property, and it's a big property, it's like 443 rooms, plus or
Yes.
minus there, right?
Hmm.
And you were handed that. Not only that, and you were also told now you're going to be going through the renovations and you have to keep the property running. What
Yes.
went through your mind when that happened? And once you took over, what was the first decision you have to make?
Yes, and we had no buffer floors. Sorry, I have to add that in there. That was a
That's a
lot of
big
fun.
deal.
That was my favorite part actually was no buffer floors. My first decision that I had to make, I mean, I'm really lucky because I had a lot of support. So I had Carrie as, a huge part of this renovation. She was the one that helped me with pretty much just our positioning. Um, and making sure that whatever happened to the hotel and however we were going to market ourselves always made sense from a consumer standpoint. And so, we use certain rooms like certain words like reimagined instead of renovation and, transformed instead of construction. Like, so I learned so much from Carrie because it was just all about how the consumer is, digesting everything that's going on. And so, formerly known as Ohana Waikiki East, for a little while, we wanted to make sure we were still, um, we were still, I, I guess, able to be found by the guests, when they're searching for us, because a lot of them had already booked us for Ohana Waikiki East. There's a construction site going on. How do we navigate that? So I would say just a lot of logistics on how we were going to execute. What did, the room stripping schedule look like? What did the return schedule look like? Who on my team was going to be part of that? And, we had to figure out how to budget for the labor hours for each room that our team pretty much stripped and returned. And then, multiply that times the floors. And yeah, it was a lot of trial and error once again because we had to figure out how do we stay profitable? How do we make sure that our labor doesn't just really go like how many people do we really need to tackle one room? And so we just had to do it one round, make sure that we were tweaking and making sure that we were working smart and not hard. And eventually we came up with a formula that worked for each room, and then we just had a schedule. Uh, but on top of that, the guests are always a big, consideration piece too, because we had to make sure that as the hotel was getting boarded up and navigation routes were becoming, inaccessible, there was one point where the guests had to walk around the hotel to access us, and it was through these man-made corridors, and they had to walk outside into the elements. So sometimes rain was a factor, wind could be a factor because we're right by where the trade winds would blow from Manoa Valley and Palolo Valley. And sometimes that would be an issue because, we have guests arriving at all hours of the night and I don't have certain attendants that are available to assist. So it, as much as I'd like to say I made the decisions, it was more so just making adjustments on our normal operations. We tried not to change it too much so that the guests and the staff could still get some sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
I think, and Kiana, I think you're underplaying it a lot because I think unless you've actually been through this type of renovation, it's a full-scale renovation, you're still open, you can't even begin to imagine the amount of chaos and the amount of juggling that's required on behalf of the leadership team. And Kiana was coming into this as a new GM and, learning everything as she was going, and to watch her handle that was really truly a beautiful thing to experience because there was no there was no issue that was too big and there was no issue that was too small for her. There was never an issue of, oh, I'm the GM, that's too small for me to handle, somebody else go do it. Kiana would literally be like up to her elbows in like water and dirt and stuff because that's how she is. That's how she is as a leader. And I think, you'll never brag about yourself like this, sister, and I know that, but um, to really watch her go through that and between the guest experience, the consumer experience that we had to put out there, but the team experience too, because you're managing a team through a really difficult time in a hotel's lifetime. And to watch her do that and balance that really beautifully it was a wonder to watch. And I loved it. I loved watching every second of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that a lot.
Just, and to give the listeners a sense of magnitude, right? How big was the staff team you're managing during that time?
Our team altogether was about 60 people.
Mm.
And, we didn't never furlough anybody. We managed our hours. There were some times where some of our staff would go and work at other hotels if, their floors were out of service. Vacation, we just tried to get everybody to take their vacation. So we were really managing it to make sure that, again, we gave them a sense of normalcy. Nobody had a negative impact to their, their quality of life and their ends meet. But yeah, it was a good amount of, I always had something to handle.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I really want to point out the human aspect of it, right? Actually, something that Carrie mentioned because we were doing some social media content, and I think one thing it talks about from Carrie's side of things on a revenue perspective, right? People always think about yes, they try to maximize profit by having ideally a higher room rate. Theoretically, you can make as much profit with a lower occupancy. That's kind of what an asset manager or a owner would think, right? But now on the other side, knowing that the hotel operation is a livelihood for some of the staff too, right? Now, if you're really cutting that down, the hours and all that, now what the staff team is going to be doing, when they don't have all the hours that they need, kind of to support their families. So I think kind of that, it just reminded me of that aspect where hospitality is not just a game of like number optimization, but again, cut back to that human staff guest aspect, right? This is what makes hospitality truly a very special industry because you are blending in all of these different aspects to make it work.
Yes, absolutely. And we didn't take that approach. We tried to fill the hotel constantly. We even paused in the middle of the summer for just a little bit for room pack to just fill up those rooms to make sure that we got every occupancy number that we could get. So and to your point, it really did benefit my team because then we didn't slow down in hours in any way. And that's another thing that we really tried to equip our team with from the beginning was, we adopted this like service over structure mindset to all of my hosts working. And so basically what that means to us is that, our service is going to outweigh any issue that the building is going to pose. So the construction, they're going to complain about. The dust, they'll complain about. The noise, they'll complain about. We know these things, but I wanted the team to understand that they had an influence over the final impression when the guest has left. And, they get that survey saying, how would you rate us? And I I knew they were going to say something about, their experience with the hotel side, but I wanted them to say, oh my gosh, but Carrie Brown, like, let me tell you, I would absolutely come back just for her service. And she's the reason why I will be returning. And
Mm.
we had a lot of those reviews, actually.
Wow.
And that, to me, was a huge win. Even if it was, I don't know, like a 3-star, but they were raving about the team. That was the goal, to make sure that we kept them happy and kept them, feeling confident that they could keep going on and championing this entire renovation. Because we wanted to make sure that by the time we were done, the product matched the service. And that's what we were able to do, because my team is just very resilient,
Mm.
and they've been through all kinds of crisis moments. And yeah, they went through so much that by the time we were done, it was just like, it was a true paradise. And, it still is to this day. But I'm really grateful to work for Outrigger, because they consider the livelihoods of our team. And even through COVID, my gosh, we didn't even lay off a single hourly host.
Wow.
We were on furlough, but we were all brought back. And, the hourly hosts are really what, we're all about. So
Wow.
big,
That's
big focus on them.
incredible. So inevitably during that period of renovation, right? There's, guests still gonna be posting negative reviews about the situations, right? It's inevitable. So during
Yeah.
the period, what was the most negative review that you've ever received? Honestly, it doesn't have to be like just that renovation time, just maybe like the whole time, while you're jamming the property, right? So
Yeah.
most negative review that you've ever received, and what did you do about it?
Well, you mean in the whole, during the renovation?
Yeah, even through
Well, I have pretty,
I would assume that's kind of when things would happen. But if you actually have stories about something worse that happened outside the renovation window, I mean, we can talk about that too.
well, we have stories for sure, but I mean, the one that comes to mind is there was a family, like a big group of rooms traveling together for a wedding, and it was a destination wedding, and they were all from Australia. And they happened to be saying, when we were working on our elevators, um, the landings that are on the lobby level and the street level and the first floor, like just basically all of the public area elevator landings. So because we were renovating those areas, we had to actually like close off some of them. We have 3 guest elevators that are available on the main lobby. And so, for example, we had one route to one elevator, and it was only one elevator, but we still filled up that hotel. And then it was maybe 2 elevators that were remaining. And just based off of what, the contractors needed from us, we needed to follow, what they required. And so it was a huge challenge, because during the summertime, like maybe August, around there, we were very high in occupancy, and they were traveling during that time, and they had to wait so long to take the elevator. And, you know, and then of course, there were times when the elevator would just go down for whatever reason. Something would, I don't know, too much weight, it would just cause it to go off. So there would be no elevator. And so I remember one time I was actually at the church, I was at the Aloha Festival Court Ho'okupu offering at the Waikiki Beach Walk. And I was about to offer my offering to the king and the queen, and I got this really long email from one of the guests, and it was ranting, just threatening me that we're going to go online. This is unacceptable. My whole family has been coming or been traveling for this, and nobody said anything. So it got really bad, to the point where by the time I finished the email, I said, I need to go there right now. So I left the court, I ran back to the hotel, and the elevators were not working. And then by the time Otis came to fix the elevators, the line was so long, it was out to the street. So I just jumped into action. I told my team, okay, we're going to get a cooler, just fill it with a bunch of drinks. You're just going to be handing out some cold beverages to those who are waiting. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask anybody, and we're going to invite them to follow us. We're going to take them to the service elevator, which of course means you have to go around the building, down the basement, through the housekeeping. But it was a way to get them up to their rooms. And so I did that, and my team followed. And so we were just escorting guests, apologizing for the inconvenience, and trying to take them through this like maze of a construction site. And it was at times embarrassing, because certain things are not looking the way that they should for a guest experience. And, we took them up to the room, and I remember there was one guest that I was assisting, and she said, this is unacceptable. We're traveling for a wedding and we have all these rooms. And I said, oh, I believe you just emailed me. I said, are you Mrs. Sarada? And she says, oh, no. I said, oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for staying with us. I'm so sorry about this inconvenience. We are looking into the situation and we're going to rectify it immediately. I apologize for the long wait. And so got her upstairs. And as soon as she got upstairs, I got an email back saying, one of your staff just assisted me to the back of house elevators. So I just wanted to let you know we've been taken care of. And I thought, that was me. I mean, it was a lot more theatrical in the moment just because there were about, 15 rooms that were times four and waiting for this elevator. And then that was that one wedding group that threatened that they were all going to post negative reviews. They were all going to threaten with, requests for refund. And I mean, that was like a normal day. So you multiply that times every single day after, and, you just have a bulletproof vest on at that point. And so what I really tried to go in with every time was I'm just here to help. I mean, whenever the guest would say something, a little bit threatening, I would just say, absolutely, you're 100% right. Let's make this right. I agree with you. And they'd just be like looking at me saying, and I said, no, you shouldn't have to pay. We're going to take that off. Absolutely. And so, you're in no position to really argue with them. You're only making it worse. So, I mean, for every guest that you end up compensating, you're going to get like a really happy guest or five other guests that they're going to tell, like the service was great. The hotel was under construction. And so another thing that we really tried to do was we tried to redeem ourselves. So when these things happen, rather than just throw out money at everybody, because in my opinion, it's just more insensitive way to resolve issues. I really care about redeeming ourselves and I want them to have the experience that they paid for. So we'll invite them back on us and say, I really want you to have what you anticipated. And, I apologize that this was not that. So we want to make this right. I want you to be one of our first guests that comes to stay at the brand newly renovated OUTRIGGER Waikiki Paradise Hotel. And when you're ready, please reach out to me. I'm happy to set that up for you and we will ensure it's a flawless return. And we've had a lot of guests that have done that. And I'm grateful that we've won them over for the most part. We've had a lot of great reviews the second time around. And it's been good because I believe that the relationship is there. They trust us. And it's not just let me just write you a check and goodbye. I really want them to know that when, they stayed with us, we wanted to make it right. And that's what we're all about, is just doing the right thing, making sure that they understand that piece of our hearts pretty much. So, yeah.
Talking about crisis management, and I think this is the unreasonable hospitality to a level that I haven't heard any other people mention yet. So, this is like talking about like you are actually taking actions to really take care of the guests and make sure they have experience. I think, many hotels and many leaders, we always talk about that, right? But I think what you just showed and demonstrates really like what it was like in action in a shitty situation. I don't know what to say from there.
We had some other issues. Like we had for example, water shutdowns that did not go as planned. And so guests did not have water for longer than anticipated. Certain shut-off valves didn't work. But the thing with those is that we just handled it as it came through. But yeah. I mean, it was really the ones that chose to go that, upset route. Like, I'm going to threaten you with 25 to 50 reviews, and what are you going to do about it? It's really, it is the action that you take. And so it was important to me that whatever we said, whatever we did, it was all going to be pure, and that they felt that we really cared. It's not just an automated response. You're really going to get a person when you talk to them. And so that's why a lot of those guests spoke with me. I was there with the front desk, and my front desk went through a whole lot because they have a really, really small, hot, temporary front desk, and it was just cramped, and it was summer, and, sure, they could wait in line to talk to them, but, I would easily just go out and talk to them myself. That way we just take care of the guests faster, because that's ultimately the goal, take care of them.
Yeah. I think the trick with Kiana's team and the way she handles from a leadership perspective is most people just handle it, right? You quiet the guest concerns, But this team really went the extra mile to flip those concerns into true loyalty. Like you have these people coming back time and time again, and that stems from a not great place all the time, right? They're frustrated, they're
Yeah.
pissed. And to see how this team really handles things with genuine care and turns that into loyalty is something that is core to hospitality. Because not everybody's going to have a great time, but the
Yeah.
way to handle it is makes all the difference in the world.
Right. And I tell my team every single day that, we have 443 rooms and, sometimes we're going to have 1,000 guests, at a time. Like it just depends on what's going on in the hotel, but we're going to have double the amount of guests that we have of rooms. So if you come to work and you think that every single day is going to be just complaint free, issue free, then that's on you because you're not setting yourself up for success. And so I try to empower them and I set them up for realizing that, we should anticipate these challenges. We anticipate the issues that come through because that's why we're here. We're here to help. We're here to solution seek. And, we're going to resolve it. And that's why you've been selected. Not everybody can do this job, but that's why we want you because you can.
Mm.
And when they start understanding that that's the real superpower that they have, excuse me, then that's when the pride kicks in. And then they realize I am resilient. And I've done this so many times before, but it's really all about mindset because even with my housekeeping, they hate to complain to me. Let me tell you, they hate it because I will always come back at them and say, okay, so what are we going to do about it? Oh, my tub is chipping. Okay, great. So what are we going to do? You're going to tell me now and I'm going to go and try to fix it, right? And then, yeah, okay. And we've already fixed the tub the next day. So it's like for everything that they complain or they have an issue with or something's not working, I challenge them. I just say, okay, so what do you think we should do? And it flips their mindset to always be, like I said, solution seeking and not just problem reporting.
Yeah.
Because that is just, that's kind of, I think, the hamster wheel some people get stuck on is, issue, 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 issue. And then it's like, that's all they're getting. That's all they're saying. So there's never any connection between the two, between leader and host. It's just like one is a receiver of problems, the other one is just feeding them problems. So it's been great because my team has adopted that, ownership of anything that they report. They'll come to me. And this is going all the way to the housekeepers
Mm.
and my bell attendant. So, we have adopted this and cultivated this problem solving, you know, I guess culture here.
This is a career advice that goes beyond hospitality, and I think that's truly one key element that separate successful people from those who are still struggling, right? Just
Yep.
always there's a reason to complain for certain things when for I would say 99% of the time, like everyone has that authority and is into like it's part of the scope to be able to solve that versus just waiting like for a savior to rescue them or so
Yeah.
I think it's really that mentality that really sets you up and I think was the challenging part and you tackle that is like not just for this is not just a characteristic for you as a person but now propagating that to your team, training the team to have the same problem solving mentality. This is something that is so like it's much easier said than done. And I think just from what you
You
share, you make that happen.
But it's funny because because I'm ignorant in a lot of areas, like I've only went to the front desk. So I genuinely was asking them, what do you think we should do? So I wanted to learn from them. And it's funny because they'd be looking at me like, well, you tell me what to do. And I was like, oh, no, I don't know. What do you think we should do?
Run
So,
over and be
you
curious.
know, yeah, of course, I've always been very curious. So I meant it wholeheartedly and not trying to, throw it back at them in a
Yeah.
disrespectful way. But I meant it like, okay, so what happens when you do this? And what happens when you try to fix it? Have they tried to fix it before? So
Mhm.
asking these questions has actually led me to answers faster. And it's been great because I involve them, but I honestly have to because they're the ones that are the experts. I haven't done those things. And
Mm.
and I wish I did. My advice to everybody is to stay dynamic and take all the chances to
Yeah.
try every department. Don't do what I did, which was just one track. I would have if I had more time to do all the other things, I would have. But when I ask them these questions, they also know it's because I want to learn from them. But it's great now because now they understand that Kiana really doesn't know. So we're gonna show her what we know. She's gonna help us with what she knows, and then together we find this, solution.
I just learned something from you as a leader too. So thank you very much, Kiana, for sharing that.
It has worked for me.
Yeah. Well, I just want to continue the conversation about guest experience and reviews, right? So I think kind of from what you just, showcased the way that you handle those, negative, feedback and turning that into opportunities for the properties, right?
Mhm.
I think something truly amazing that you did was I mean, let's talk about TripAdvisor for a moment. I think for the longest time through the renovation or, when the property was still kind of the old brand, Ohana, right?
Mhm.
It was it was a mediocre review, right? I think it was probably ranked, 50 plus something, right? Across all these Waikiki hotels to right now, you guys are constantly in the top three period. So again, obviously we heard lots of stories already, but, what specifically kind of drove that change in such a short period of time? Because we're talking about what just in a year or two, right? To have that dramatic change, I haven't seen anything that could really move up the rank that fast. So what's the secret sauce?
Thank you for, bringing that up, and thank you for asking. But yeah, we were number 58, and we have been number 3 and number 4 for like the past 2 months, just going back and forth. And what really drove it so quickly, in my opinion, is just the team. I mean, it's really, they have such big hearts, and they have, such care in those hearts. And so, like I said, they have always had this very special ability to connect with the guests. A lot of these guests that stay at this hotel have been return guests for 30 to 40 years, and it's every year that they come for many, many weeks, sometimes over a month. And, it's amazing to watch my team just pick up with them where they left off the last time that they spoke with them, and it's quite beautiful. So I really do believe that the spirit of aloha has always been in the hearts of our hosts, and it's wonderful that now the product matches that service, and I just think it's the best of both worlds. But it's a very, very, on the flip side, if you have a beautiful product, and you don't have the service to match, then that can be detrimental, and you can move in the opposite direction. So it really, I have to say that they're the foundation, and being able to continuously rise. And amazingly enough, we started the renovation at number 35.
Hmm.
When they finished it, they were number 25. So they consistently moved up, or steadily moved up 10 spots despite the renovation. And this renovation was intense because, it was really no buffer floors, and just everything was done all at once. The public spaces, the public areas, the guest rooms, the corridors, all of it, even the pool deck and the fitness center. And so I just really am proud of them because we have this service over structure mindset. So it's very common that almost every single review you see a guest mentioning a host, and their name will be on it, and they'll shout them out specifically and say that they're the reason why they're giving them 5 stars, and they will come back just for that person. And a lot of them get handwritten notes, and it's cute because sometimes they'll even have like a letter to each other as their stay continues. They'll write to each other, the housekeeper and the guest, so they form that relationship. But again, it's really just empowering them and understanding that, maybe they are not the CEO of this hotel, but to the guest perspective, they're just as powerful.
Hmm.
And so really instilling that sense of accountability, ownership, and pride in the team, so that whatever happens, they take the actions that they believe their CEO would take, and they're not waiting, because every moment that you make them wait is a moment wasted, and it can actually do even worse. So what I love to tell my team all the time is that I want them to take every matter so seriously and document it, right? So whatever the guest is complaining about, just start asking them questions.
Hmm.
Where did this occur? When did it happen? And when did you notice it? And, when did you book the reservation? Okay, even if they don't know what to do with that information, the fact that they're already doing that is sending, a message to the guests that they care and they're doing something about it and they're going to help them. So they trust the staff already. And I've taught my team that, it's actually helpful because sometimes you don't know what to say when the guest is very angry. So if you're actually physically doing something, it's going to, communicate that you're going to help them. And so I tell them that, we're going to work on the next steps together. But even if they don't know what to do, the fact that they did it and then they take it to the manager and the manager helps, it helps tremendously. And that's what they did a lot of the time during the renovation. We did empower them to compensate the guests, within means. So if it was like an entire stay, then that was when we kind of kicked in and said, okay, we're going to invite them back, on us. But if it was a very severe situation, the guest was impacted, then, if they needed to comp a night and, just take care of them, that was more important than anything else. Because we would tell them, if you take care of a guest, then that's not going to be a bad thing for the hotel in the the big picture. We're always going to make money, we're always going to make revenue, but we need to make sure that we take care of the guests. If we don't take care of the guests, then that's when we're not going to have the revenue. And so I always tell them this too, is that they have two goals as a hotel operator, to make revenue and to get those good reviews. And if we cannot make revenue, then still need to get those good reviews. And then sometimes, you're going to get both. And sometimes you're going to get a lot of revenue. Like, you'll get that upsell and, you'll have a great win in that way, but you might not get the review. But we have to always have at least one of those R's. But if we get into zero, then that's when we fail. And so it helps them to understand that we're in the business of people. And, they just, they understand the art of what they do. And so they know that it's a fine line and it's a balancing act because there's no black and white way to operate and take care of the guests. It depends on what the guests need, and that's how we mirror them. But I have a really, really, really special team, and their emotional intelligence is like no other. And, we're actually one of the smaller hotels in the Outrigger collection. A lot of the other hotels are closer to 500 rooms, and, we're less than 450, but, they are they take it as if they are the biggest hotel. They have so much pride. And I'm just really proud that they, they do what they do, and basically how they take care of the guests has translated into the results. So
Geeks,
watch.
for you.
Yes.
So as a GM, and I know like you heard us say this ad nauseum, but as a GM, do you really think that a higher TripAdvisor score and better guest reviews lead to better and more revenue?
A higher TripAdvisor score.
Yeah, so better guest review scores, do those naturally correlate to more revenue?
So I think OWK is a great example, right? So like they are revenue monsters, right? They dominate, and they have always been kind of around like number 12 and number 10. So I feel like that's been like where they've lived. And I feel like once they finish their renovation, then, they're going to get to a higher spot. And I do feel like that will actually help generate more revenue.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like the guests are paying a lot of attention to TripAdvisor. They also tell us too, when they book, that's how they decided on us. So in my opinion, I do feel like, yes, that is a big deciding factor to how much the guests are going to pay attention to us. I realize too, it's also, loyalty is a big thing too, and, points. And so I'm aware of that. But when it comes to like the first timers or the guests who want to experience culture and they want to go to like a more boutique style or something that's totally unique, I think TripAdvisor is a huge deciding factor for those guests. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
I think something you mentioned early on, the philosophy of service over structure, right? I think that, you know, especially hotel as a piece of real estate, there are always like so many constraints about, not everyone has like a top star, 5-star Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons or anything like that, right? So when you have a fixed form factor, really like the only one of the few level that you can pull is like really providing that unreasonable service that beyond people's expectation. So I think kind of back to Carrie's question, I do think this is absolutely one thing an operator can do to really influence and to give guests a reason to pay more for that premium service, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, like I think there are operators who are always getting fixated with that. Oh, we are just a 2-star, 3-star mid-scale hotel. Like, we're not in the best location and things like that. There's nothing we can do about it. But I think what you just share the whole time, right? It's not true. I think there are things, there are ways to make, you know, influence and convince people like there's a reason why you stay there for something
Mm.
that you're necessarily gonna get anywhere else.
And they're willing to pay for it too. And
Yeah.
that's, to your point, especially the newer travelers. So this new generation of just really wanting to be involved in, the culture of the place that they're visiting and really understand it and get a sense of, an authentic experience, is definitely something that I feel we're seeing a lot more of. But I do feel that the reviews have an influence over the rate, like you said. Like, so you can charge a higher rate. And that's why Outrigger Waikiki, like, they haven't even renovated yet, but they dominate. They do so well.
Mm.
So it's like amazing because it's like they have always had around top 10, up and down, but their reviews are pretty strong and
Mm.
the product is not. So it's like, I feel like that's exactly why those guests are willing to pay a decent ADR for that property. And it's
For
all because of reviews.
Can I ask one more question
Yeah.
about TripAdvisor that may not have anything to do with the guests? How did you
Mhm.
pick to celebrate when you hit number three? I think for me, the way that you celebrate with your team when they hit milestones is something that really makes your team truly above and beyond. So how did you celebrate?
I love that. Well, we took all of them to see Awana Cirque du Soleil show at Waikiki Beach Hotel. And it was so fun because I texted the cast members to pull them up on stage for the part where they pull part of the audience up and they have them do the interactive piece. And it was so funny. I sent them pictures, I sent them names, and when they went to the crowd and were looking for, I sent them the seat numbers. When they went to the crowd and they went to pull them up on stage, my team must have been really shy because they were just going backwards. And Sal, the trickster, he said, Leonora, Kiana said, and you could hear it on the microphone, like, oh my God. So I have some pretty funny pictures actually of them doing all the Hawaii Five-O, the air guitar and the air drums, and it was so much fun. But we got to go as a family, is what we call each other, and we did it all together. And we got to invite a plus one, so they got to invite their other halves or their children or their grandchildren, and then we all just got to enjoy the show together. So they love to celebrate.
Aw.
Wow.
Number one is going to be really difficult to top, though. I'm like,
Yeah, you're gonna have to find
okay,
a way.
number one is going to be, I don't know they're going to want to do a dinner cruise, fireworks show.
Yep, you're gonna have to rent a yacht, my friend.
I know. I'm going to have to talk to all the safety people to make sure that I can do all this because they love to go big. That's one thing too. They're just very motivated by their sense of pride and the ways that they can celebrate, especially if there's ice cream. They just love ice cream. So that's like their biggest motivation in life.
Wow. Just get jealous. Carrie, you gotta think about some of our milestone celebration too, right?
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. I need to take a play from Kiana's book for sure.
Yeah. So
It's fine.
yeah, so Kiana, so thinking about that, right? Obviously, many, operators and all that, they can always like, say that, oh, because South is so, much bigger corporations, bigger properties, bigger whatever, right? That's why Kiana and Orica can do all of the above, right? So for an operator, let's say, we have many who have maybe 30 rooms, 50 rooms. They don't have like a corporate support. It's only really the owner operators running the show. Like, what are the things that these kind of operators can really take what you just said and really replicate and influence, like, and have similar results at a much smaller scale?
A smaller scale. Well, I think that if you just take care of your employees, then they'll usually take care of the guests. I mean, it's not always perfect every time, but for the most part, if you have happy employees, they yield happy guests, which yield happy owners. But it's really important that you are managing those relationships and making sure that if there's any type of red flag, like they are not happy and maybe they're not saying something, that you catch it early on. Um, and I have fun with that. You don't need to be a massive property or a massive company to take care of your team. You can just be a team of three, and as long as you're finding ways to make them smile and just pour a little bit more into their cup each day, it's gonna, especially in the mornings or whenever their morning is, making sure that they are set up with that extra boost of confidence or happiness. Just being to have a little fun or a little ice cream, whatever speaks to their heart, and just making sure that you find a lot of happy moments to feed them. Then I think, or I know that usually makes them feel like they matter and valued and appreciated, because it's not just about business. We are in the business of people. Like, our business itself is people, and I feel like hospitality is the hardest thing to sell because you're selling memories that don't exist yet. So, how do you invest in those memory building hosts? Your staff is creating those memories, hopefully that they're going to be good memories, because it could be the opposite. So, it's really like an extra layer of insurance, I would say, is just really taking care proactively of your team and making sure that they have all the tools they need, they have all the resources, and if they were to get headhunted by another company, they would not leave because they already are so happy with everything that's going on in their company and what they do for them. And then, other things that you can do for the guests is just, for what we do is really provide them that authentic cultural experience. So even just bringing the lei making to them in the lobby, and kukui na kupe'es and hula lessons, ukulele lessons, just allowing them to have an authentic part of their experience at the hotel, I think is a great way to just leave a lasting impression on them and their families. And it's great too, because then you don't necessarily need to leave the hotel. It can just be something that you host in the lobby, maybe once a week or twice a week, and maybe twice a week, so you catch majority of your guests that stay. But yeah, I think just making sure that you don't forget the emotional piece. Remembering that it is humans taking care of humans, and humans are not robots. So if you just remember that, and you find ways to touch their hearts, the hosts and the guests, then that is like the perfect formula, I think. And then you get those good reviews, and then you get those good revenues.
Yeah. So to turn that into a more concrete example, right? So let's say tomorrow you were to walk into a brand new hotel that you're going to manage, right? Well, brand new in the sense that, it's just like a new property you have to manage. Step one, the first month, what will be the lowest cost, highest impact change that you think you could make without doing a renovation?
For the Yes, or for just for the hotel.
Anything, yeah.
I think it would just be, that an added arrival experience, just
Mm,
making them feel very welcomed and giving them a sense of VIP. So shell lays are really inexpensive and they last forever. And you can easily get maybe 500 for just less than like maybe $100 or less. I mean,
mm,
they're quite inexpensive, and it's like something small, but it's still a lay, so it's still a cultural piece that you can offer every single guest. If it's a brand new hotel, maybe, you just make it even more fancy by making it fresh flower lays, or maybe you make it the fancy shell lay for every first 100 guests that can say, wow, I'm the first hundred guests, or I'm
mm.
one of the first guests. So what we did for the first guest of the renovation is I hand wrote a card for every guest that stayed in the room for the first time. And we just had two little cookies. And we had the cookies with a card from me that said, welcome home, well, congratulations, you are the first guest to stay in this room. And we're so happy that you're here. And so I think it's those just small, low cost, right? But it's like
Yeah.
a big impact, because then they can also take pictures of that. Hopefully they post it, and it just shares and goes viral to other people wanting to get their chance to stay in the hotel for the first time if it's a new hotel. Um, but yeah, low cost, big impact. I think it's just finding those little moments to just add a little, like, wow, I feel so special to the guest experience.
It's funny, especially the handwritten card. It's surprising that don't see that often enough that, sometimes, when I was staying at the five-star, the luxurious hotel like Andaz and, Ritz-Carlton and whatever, right? It felt like, okay, I came in, I expected that, I would always just getting those handwritten card from a GM, but
Yeah.
it's such a low cost investment that gave you asymmetrically like lots of emotional value that people don't realize. And I just now realize, why would, hotels not doing that more often?
Yeah, and I mean it really adds personalization. You feel the personalization because I mean someone wrote it for you and wrote your name and wrote the reason why you're there. And I try to do that as often as I can. So if there's a special occasion going on, then I will handwrite that card. But
Mm.
it's also just making that moment that they're experiencing last a little bit longer and they can take it home with them. But yeah, these things are just not very costly, and I think that hopefully for the most part it makes them feel a little bit more special.
Wow. Kiana, last question for you. So now that with all the amazing story that you share, you've now went through the renovations, you had an amazing team that is so empowering doing all the stuff that we just talked about. You won a big award for the year. Like almost like you're now getting at the pinnacle of your career thus far. What's your next challenge ahead? Like what, like at the Paradise Hotel, what is the next challenge that you are facing and solving right now?
Getting to number one. That's my girl. Well,
Love
that's always
that.
been the goal. That's always been the goal. But that's a great question because we should always be thinking about what's next. And what I'm trying to do with the team's support is I'm really trying to, incorporate more authentic Hawaiian culture
Mm,
into the hotel and in the guest experience. So right now, I'm working on the permitting process with the city and county of Honolulu to try and truly revitalize the park that's right across the street from us.
mm,
It's dedicated to Princess Kaiulani, who was the last princess to the Hawaiian monarchy, and she once lived on the land that our hotel sits on today. And so she's our biggest OG influencer, inspiration, and everything we do is in honor of her. And in fact, even the lei that's behind me is pikake lei, and it's intentionally selected because it's her favorite flower. And so we have it as our property pattern. And Brent was a huge part of this project that is so special to my heart. And he's the one that helped me design this, and he was with me through the entire Sense of Place project. Um, I miss him so much. I know I can always call him, but it's like, working with him was such a dream. And I'm so grateful that he was with us uh, during this project that, I was blessed to champion. And he believed in the power of the princess and that he believed that the people would love it because she was known as the people's princess. So there is this really small park that is dedicated to her, and there's a statue of her with her peacock. And unfortunately, when it was erected in 1999, it has since kind of gone downhill with, just its upkeep and just,
mm,
its look and feel. It just is not what it used to be. It was very vibrant in the beginning, and she was always adorned with lei, and she was always quite polished. Now, today, it's very overlooked, and, it's got weeds everywhere. The grass is hardly growing anywhere. The flowers are no longer there. And so we really wanted to, I really dream to revamp that park and
mm,
make it a gathering place for the guests to
mm,
enjoy. We can teach them about the culture, we can teach them about the land. I want to someday host the cultural activities in the park and, even offer live music and, create a real activation in the park regularly so that we can invite the guests to learn more about the history of this land and why it's so important and why we have this pikake pattern, here.
mm,
And that way we can really hopefully connect with the guests more, and they can share that story with whomever they, come across. And maybe that'll inspire the next guest to come and be part of the story. But that's the next thing. We have the beautiful product, and I want to make sure that it's still got a lot of meaning behind it because it's beautiful for sure. But we want to make sure we stay connected to our roots, which is, the history of Ainahau, which is the name of the land that we're on today.
mm.
And so I've learned that it takes a lot of patience and it takes quite a bit of state-funded agencies. And there are some agencies I didn't even know existed. So I'm taking my time. I'm asking all the questions. Department of Urban Forestry. Sounds like Harry Potter to me. But I learned that you need to go through all these channels. And the good thing is that now it's led me to certain people that are in, the legislature that are behind me. And I even have some of Governor Green's folks even helping
Wow.
me to potentially apply for funding from the green fee to restore that park. And so, it makes sense to malama that park because, the tourists are here. We want them to come here. We want them to stay. We want them to they're not intimidated. And unfortunately, the way that the park looks now, it's quite intimidating. And that's my goal is to transform it, to eventually turn it into this paradise garden that we can be proud of and we can be continued stewards of the land for. But like I said, these all great things are taking time and I'm learning that right now. But it doesn't mean that, I'm going to give up anytime soon. I just, it motivates me even more to, just keep steady. And my team is very much invested too, because each year that October 16th rolls around, which is Princess Kaiulani's birthday, we have a massive birthday party for her and we honor
Wow.
her with lei. We do pule at her statue. And every year that we're there, we all kind of look around and say, we can do better than this. And so it's that emotional piece that plays on our hearts that we are, wanting to feel proud of. And so I think that it just motivates us to get to that point someday. So we're a little bit closer with each day that passes. And hopefully, by the time October 16th rolls around, we'll have made even more progress. But that's my commitment to Princess Kaiulani and the land and my team.
Wow. Yeah. That shows beyond just the property. I think talking about, minding for the stewardship of our local communities, just in the people around, just be mindful of that. I think that's also something that we actually had another episode talking with some operators in Montana, Eric Shackleton and Liza Coons are talking about kind of a similar concept. So listeners, feel free to listen to that episode as well. And about brand Shiratari, we actually talking with Brand, we talk a lot about the whole rebranding story of the paradise. So lots of what Kiana was talking, another bonus content for listeners who actually listen to that one to talk about, just listening more about that rebranding story. Again, also an amazing thing, just that connect with what we're just talking about today. Bonus question for you, Kiana. Who is your biggest, we talk about mentorship, but like, who's your biggest champion or champions in your career and the best advice that you still took it wholeheartedly right now?
Oh, well, it's hard to choose, but I mean, the biggest champions of my career, I definitely think actually Carrie Brown is a big one because she's always really been there for me. Even when I didn't know I needed her, like I said, she's such a big cheerleader and she's always available no matter how busy she is. And I learned a great deal from Carrie just because she taught me something early on in my leadership career. She told me, always make time for rest because it won't always be available. And that's something I found to be true because I've learned, that if I'm not 100% ready to lead the team, then, I can't do a good job. So I need to feel 100%. I need to feel my best. That way I'm operating at my best and I'm leading my best. So it's helped me to be a better leader for my team. And also, Carrie's always been a sister to me. And we've been through so many different types of crisis and, at all scales, from natural disasters to fires to floods to pandemics to just everything. And she's always very resilient. And even if I was very panicked, she would never be. And so I feel like I've learned a great deal from her on how to stay steady and solution seek. She's a perfect example of how to solution seek and stay calm and navigate the path forward and towards the light because a lot of other folks can only see the darkness and they will lead themselves down a path of destruction. So she's always looking for the way out. How do we fix this? And so I ask myself those questions. And then another really, really, I have to mention, brother, is
Yes.
my mentor, Edwin Torres, and he's now the general manager at Outrigger. And when I worked for him, I worked with Carrie, and his last position that I worked with him He was our complex general manager, where he oversaw the Ohana East at the time, and then the Outrigger Waikiki Beachcomber Hotel. And his advice to me was so simple, but it was so powerful. And it's another saying that I tell myself that has served as a principle in, just how I operate. And it's just to always do the right thing. And it's so simple, but it again, it holds great power because it's always helped me to navigate through the challenges. And he would tell me, there's no black and white way of how to do anything, of how to solve anything, but, just do the right thing. As long as you do the right thing, it will guide you and, it'll help you to find your way to that light that, Carrie's so good at finding all the time. And I remember sometimes I'd ask him, right, but how do I fix this? Like, he'd be like, what's the right thing to do? And I'm like, well, I don't know, but the guest outside, she needs help. He's like, well, then help her. I'm like, but what should I do? He's like, you'll know, just help her. And I'm glad he did that to me though, because if he would have just told me what to do, I don't think I would have learned the skills to be able to help them sufficiently. I probably just would have done what he told me. So now I don't have him. I mean, I have him, an island away, but now it's helped me to lead the renovation and just any type of emergency situation that we're faced with. Always do the right thing. And I really try to inspire my team to always stay people focused. All of the technical details figure themselves out. And, as long as we're operating from an ethical standpoint and moral compass, then that is what we'll always be proud of. I can never fault them for taking care of somebody and making sure that they're okay. If it's going to cost me, then that's something that we're going to handle. And maybe we can learn from it. Maybe we can learn about how to be more cost effective. And maybe we can learn how to be a little bit more resourceful. Maybe we didn't have to do whichever route they took. But I would always tell them that I never want to have to talk to you about giving not enough. Like I want to have to talk to you about giving too much. But if we're not doing enough and we're not taking care of the people, that's not good. But if you're giving away the house because you're taking care of everybody, then that's something I'm willing to talk to you about and we can learn from. So help me to take care of the people when I don't know how to do the details. So I'm really grateful to him for that. And then lastly is just Cece Cecilia Hamau, and she's the GM at the Outrigger Waikiki Beachcomber. Huge shout out to her, because if she did not ever recruit me and corner me in the office, then I would never become a manager. She's so sweet, but she's powerful and she's strong. And she told me to try, and I will never forget that. She just said it so simply: you have to try. If you don't try, how will you know? And that was now, almost 10 years ago. I mean, I believe, yeah, it'll be 10 years next year that I've started management. And if it wasn't for her, my career trajectory would have been so different. And I'm just very grateful to her. Her and I have stayed very close, and our careers have kind of mirrored each other. Our pathways are almost identical. And I'm grateful that I still have her as, my sister across the way, just at another hotel. But yeah, it's a huge shout out to her for believing in me when I didn't.
Thank you so much, Kiana. We've been talking to Kiana Beimes, General Manager at Outrigger Waikiki Paradise Hotel. Kiana, where can people learn more about you?
Well, they can learn more about me by stopping by the hotel. No, just kidding. I'm always here. Well, I have a LinkedIn, and it is Kiana Beimes, just as my name is spelled, and same for my Instagram handle. It's just Kiana Beimes, my first and last name. So would love to stay connected with you, and just I look forward to listening to all your future podcasts, including Brent's.
Yep. All right. Kiana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been so wonderful to connect with you and see you again, sister. Carrie. Love you.
Love you.
All right. Signing out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Lights On podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.